Okay, so today we're gonna put the amplitude changes together with the period changes all in one graph. Okay, so um, I know the period changes are a little bit difficult, so let's kind of recap that again real quick. So um, just remember that y equals a sine bx or theta or whatever it is you're working with. That's our general form. A is going to tell us our amplitude, A for amplitude. So that's just how high and how low what numbers I'm bouncing in between. Okay, and then B helps me figure out the period by doing 2 pi divided by whatever B is. Okay, so that's how I find my period. So once I have the amplitude and the period, then I just go ahead and graph like I normally would. Just depends on if it's sine or cosine, if I'm starting at the origin or if I'm starting up at whatever the amplitude is. Okay, so let's go through number 1 together. So I have A is going to be 2, B is going to be 4. So A as my amplitude of 2 means that my whole graph is going to exist between positive 2 and negative 2. So I'm just going to bounce back and forth in between those two values. All right. And then B is 4. So I know that I need to use that to find the period. So the period is going to be 2 pi divided by 4. So in this case, that gets me pi over 2. Okay, so that means one full cycle will happen in pi over 2 radians. Okay, so that's right here. Oops. There's pi over 2. So between 0 and pi over 2, I'm going to have one full cycle. Okay, so if you remember from the last video, I have to find those quarter points. I have one of them on my graph right here, right? Halfway in between pi over 2 and 0 is pi over 4. So I know there's one there. And then I have quarter points in between each of these. So right here and right here. Okay, so for the purposes of the graph, you don't necessarily need to know what those values are. You can still make the graph. But as I tried to explain in the last video, what happens when you are not given these values, right? What happens when you're just given a blank graph and you have to find all of that? Okay, so you may at some point be asked to find what those values are, so I just need you to be able to. But it's not so bad. Halfway in between 0 and pi over 4 would just be pi over 8, right? You can always find the number by adding the two together and dividing by 2. We did this in the last video, so you might just remember that that was pi over 8. Let's see if I can kind of squeeze in a pi over 8. Let's see where. Ooh, pi, oh, geez. Oh, I'm still in rectangle. Oops. Whoops, hold on. Let's get back to pen. So that value right there is going to be a pi over 8. And then I need halfway in between, oops, pi over 4 and pi over 2. So if you remember, in the last video, we added them together. In order to add them, I need common denominators. So I'm really adding pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 2. 4, sorry. So that gets me 3 pi over 4. There's me adding them together, and then I need to take half of that. So that would be 3 pi over 8. Oops, what am I doing? 3 pi over 8. Okay, so that's this point right here. See where I am on the video? Well, maybe not. Can you see right here? That's the point I'm talking about. Okay, so that's the one that's 3 pi over 8. Okay, now I have my 4 quarter points, so now I can go ahead and graph. So this thing is sine, so that means I'm going to go ahead and start at the origin. So let's switch colors to green, and here we go. So I start at the origin. My first quarter point, now instead of just going up to 1, I'm going to go all the way up to 2. Come on, there we go. All the way up to 2. And then at my next quarter point, I'm back down to 0. At the next one, I'm down to -2. And then I'm back to 0. I wish you could see my screen on here. It keeps asking me if I want to save to photo album. And it keeps like popping up everywhere I try to like put my stylus. I don't know why. Go away. Okay. All right. So there we go. So there's one full sine cycle in between 0 and 2 pi. Of course, this keeps going. So if you wanted to continue, you're welcome to do that. And then you could see this thing just oscillating forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Okay. All right, let's try another one together. I should do like a study what's the most effective eraser pattern. I find just lines like this instead of doing like swirls. Oh, you can't. Oh, no, you can see what I'm doing. Okay. I thought maybe you couldn't even. All right, forget it. So let's see. Let's scroll over to, okay, let's do 2 together. So this time, looks like we have an amplitude of 1/2, and B is going to be 2. So let's use B to figure out what that period is. So we'll do 2 pi over B, which in this case is 2. So that means the period is just pi. Great, so that makes my life pretty easy. And if I look at my grid, they already gave me those values. So I already have pi, and I already have all the quarter points already done out for me. So great, just saves me that much work. So I'll just, let me just take a second and highlight them. So there's one full cycle is going to happen between 0 and pi, and then I'll have a quarter point at pi over 2. I'll have another one at pi over 4 and one at 3 pi over 2. Okay, so there's all my important points where things are happening. And let's go ahead and switch to red. Why not? So remember now, this one's cosine. So I'm not going to start at the origin. I'm going to start at whatever the amplitude is. And in this case, the amplitude is 1/2. So that means the highest I'm ever going to get is 1/2. So my whole graph starts right there. Okay, and then at my first quarter point, I'm going to drop down to 0. Then I drop down to -1/2, back up to 0, and then I finish out the first cycle back up at a +1/2. Okay, so this cosine curve looks like this. And then it would just keep going. If you wanted to graph some more of them. Okay, but this one's only ever going to oscillate between +1/2 and -1/2, right? Because that's my amplitude. So we're just bouncing back and forth in that one little window. Okay, maybe one more together, and then I'll let you try them. So this one, I believe, again, has the answers at the end. So feel free to check your work as you're going. Oh, I don't know. It looks like a good one. Maybe one on the back here. How about, oh, I don't know. I don't know. How about, I like the ones with the larger periods. So how about, okay, 7. Why not? So let's see what we got going on here. Okay, so A is going to be 2, B is going to be 2. So let's find the period, 2 pi over B, which in this case is 2, which means the period, whoops, is just pi. Okay, so great. That's another one. This one's already got all the ones done out for me, right? So if I'm looking right here, I already have pi and then all the quarter points. Pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4. Already done. Awesome. So if you want, I'll just do a little, just highlight each of my important points. So I kind of like to visualize that something important is going to happen there. And then let's go ahead and graph. And since this thing is, oh, let's do blue this time. What the heck? And we'll switch to pen. All right, my amplitude is 2, so that means I'm going to be bouncing in between +2 and -2, right? My whole graph will exist in that one little window. So it's cosine, so do I start at the origin? No, I'm going to start up at 2. So there's my first important point, and then I'm going to drop down to 0, drop down to -2, back up to 0, finish it out at +2. So there is my one full cycle. And then you can feel free to keep it going. Continuous forever, just like that. Okay, I hope you found this helpful. Keep practicing them. Remember that you don't have to re-find all the quarter points every time. Look and see if you did another problem that has the b value the same, right? And then, like I said in the last video, once you do a bunch of them, like, it's the same numbers that keep popping up. So don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel every time. If you have the numbers right in front of you, just go grab them. Okay? Hope this helps. See you guys later. Bye.